The Neighbor Who Never Smiles. For 30 years, not a single person on Alderton Close had seen him smile. Not once. They had theories, of course, because neighbors always have theories, but none of them were even close to the truth. Every street in England has one. The house at the end, or just past the bend, where the curtains never fully open and the garden is technically maintained but communicates nothing. No hanging baskets, no welcome mat, no evidence of anyone who wants to be found. Number 14 Alderton Close was that house. And the man inside it was Harold Sinclair, 73 years old, retired postal worker, widower, and, as the rest of the street had concluded across 3 decades of cautious observation, the most comprehensively unfriendly man in the borough of Solihull. He did not wave. He did not nod. He collected his post from the letterbox with the efficiency of a man who has no interest in the world the post came from, and he went back inside and the door closed, and that was Harold. Every morning for 30 years. Nobody knew why. That was the thing. That was always the thing. Maya Okafor had moved to Alderton Close 18 months ago, 31 years old, a secondary school history teacher who had bought the semi-detached at number 11 with the specific optimism of someone who still believed that a neighborhood was something you participated in. She had introduced herself to every household within a fortnight, left a small card through the letterboxes of the ones who weren't home, stopped to talk to the ones who were. The street had received her warmly, with the slightly performative enthusiasm of people who were quietly glad that someone young and friendly had moved in. Everyone except number 14. She had knocked on Harold Sinclair's door on her 3rd day. She had stood on his step with a small plate of jollof rice her mother had insisted she make. Because you cannot introduce yourself to new neighbors with empty hands, Maya, that is not how we were raised, and she had waited. There was a long pause. Then the door had opened, approximately 8 inches, and Harold Sinclair had looked at her with the expression of a man who had opened his door to find something he had specifically not ordered. Yes, he had said. Not hello. Not good morning. Yes, as if she were a question he was acknowledging without committing to an answer. I'm Maya. I've just moved into number 11. I brought you some food. She held out the plate. He looked at the plate. He looked at her. He said, I don't require anything, thank you, and closed the door. Not rudely, precisely, there was no slam, no dismissal in the face. He had spoken with the flat politeness of someone who considers a closed door the natural conclusion of a transaction. She told the story to Janet from number 9, who told her about the theories. That he was a miser who had fallen out with his children. That he had done something shameful years ago and was hiding from it. That he was simply a difficult man who had always been difficult and had chosen a life that suited his nature. Maya listened to all of it. She did not believe any of it. Not because she had evidence to the contrary, she had none. She simply had the specific instinct, developed across a decade of teaching teenagers, that the people who close themselves most completely have usually been opened before and found the experience very costly. She kept an eye on number 14. Not nosily, professionally, she would have said, with the patient attention of someone who teaches history and therefore understands that the most important things about people are usually not visible on the surface. She noticed things. That he swept his front step every morning at 7 with the same brush in the same direction. That he left for the shops on Tuesdays and Fridays at precisely 10:15, a canvas bag over one arm, and returned no more than 40 minutes later. That he grew roses in the narrow bed along the front wall, deep red ones, carefully tended, the only evidence of deliberate beauty in his exterior life. She noticed that he tended the roses in the early evening alone, and that when he bent to inspect a bloom he sometimes stayed bent for longer than the inspection required. She noticed that he was not inspecting the rose at all. He was simply close to it. Resting near something living. The winter came early that year. By November the close was under frost every morning, and the roses at number 14 had been cut back to their woody stems, and Harold Sinclair moved between his house and his twice-weekly errands with the particular efficiency of a man who has decided that warmth is an indoor matter. It was the 3rd week of November when Maya noticed the post. Harold collected his post every morning between 8 and 8:15. She knew this the way you know your neighbor's rhythms without intending to, by repetition, by the gentle surveillance of adjacent living. So when Wednesday arrived and the post remained in his letterbox, and Thursday, and by Friday morning there were 3 days' worth of envelopes visible through the slot, she felt the specific alertness of a person whose attention has been trained on something long enough to recognize when it stops moving. She knocked on the door of number 14 at 8:45 on Friday morning. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. A long pause and then the sound of movement inside, slow, careful, the movement of someone navigating a space with effort. The door opened. Harold Sinclair was in his dressing gown. He was holding the doorframe with his right hand in a way that was not casual. His face was the color of old wax, and there was a bruise along the left side of his cheekbone that had turned from purple to the greenish yellow of several days' healing. "Mr. Sinclair," Maya said. "I'm fine," he said. Reflex. The answer that was always ready. "You've fallen," she said. It was not a question. A very long pause. His hand tightened slightly on the doorframe. "Last Tuesday," he said eventually. "In the kitchen." "I am managing." She could see from the doorway that he was not managing. There was a chair pulled to the kitchen entrance that had not been there before, something to hold while moving between rooms. Kettle was on the counter where it did not belong. "Will you let me come in?" she asked. Another pause. The longest yet. And then, almost imperceptibly, Harold Sinclair stepped back from the door. The interior of number 14 was not what the street imagined. The theories had populated it variously with the decor of misanthropy, unwashed dishes, drawn curtains, the clutter of a man indifferent to his surroundings. What Maya found was a house so carefully ordered it was almost painful. Every surface was clean. The books on the shelves were arranged by a system she would later identify as chronological by the author's birth year. The mantelpiece held 4 objects in precise relation to each other: a clock, a small bronze dog, a folded handkerchief, and a framed photograph. She looked at the photograph while Harold lowered himself carefully into an armchair. It was a wedding photograph. Harold, younger, perhaps 40, unrecognizable in the ease of his expression, the width of his smile. Beside him, a woman in a cream dress with dark eyes and the specific radiance of someone who is laughing at the moment the photographer snaps. The photograph was not dusty. It was the most handled object in the room. "Your wife," Maya said. "Eleanor." One word. Her name a complete sentence. Maya made tea. She did this without asking, because the situation required tea and Harold was in no position to make it. She found everything easily. The kitchen was organized with the same rigid care as the living room, every item in a specific place that had not changed in years. She found the mugs on the second shelf. She found the tin of biscuits above the kettle. She found, on the windowsill above the sink, a small clay pot with a dried rose in it. Not a dead rose, a dried one, carefully preserved, the petals still holding something of their color. She brought the tea and sat in the chair across from him. He held the mug in both hands in the way that elderly people hold warm things, drawing on the heat, not just drinking. "How long ago?" she asked, looking at the photograph. 22 years, Harold said. "November the 9th. Maya was quiet for a moment. "This November?" she asked. "Last Tuesday," he said. And then, after another pause, the longest yet, the kind that contains a decision, "The anniversary." I was not attending to what I was doing. He had fallen on the anniversary of his wife's death. He had lain on the kitchen floor for 4 hours before he could get himself to the armchair. He had not called anyone because there was no one to call. His son was in Canada, his daughter estranged, the neighbors theoretical people who existed on the other side of a door he had kept closed for reasons that had felt, at the time of making them, like self-protection and had become, without his fully noticing, a kind of slow burial. Maya sat with him for 2 hours that Friday. She came back on Saturday. She came back on Sunday with food, not jollof rice this time, something simpler, soup, and he ate it at the kitchen table while she sat across from him, and he told her piece by piece the things that had made him what the street thought he was. Eleanor had been the one who smiled. He had smiled because she did. When she died, he had simply not known how to do it without her. It was not grief made him close the door. It was that he had forgotten he was allowed to open it. Nobody had reminded him. And so the years had passed. Maya did not tell the neighbors what she had found inside number 14. She understood, with the instinct of a teacher who has kept many confidences, that Harold's story was his to give, not hers to distribute. But she changed what she did. She started leaving things. Not food every time, sometimes just a note through the letterbox, short and specific. Tuesday's note said, "The roses are going to come back beautifully in spring. I can already see the new growth on the stems." Wednesday said, "I found a book about the postal service in the 1970s at the charity shop. Thought of you, leaving it on your step." She did not wait for acknowledgement. She did not require it. December arrived, and with it the street's annual ritual of Christmas lights. Alderton Close did this collectively, a committee, a WhatsApp group, a Saturday morning where everyone strung lights along their front walls and drank mulled wine from a flask that Janet from number 9 produced with the reliability of a public service. Maya was on the pavement with her lights when she heard the door of number 14 open. Harold Sinclair came out in his coat and his flat cap, carrying a string of lights. Old ones, the large bulb kind from the 1980s, slightly faded, the kind you cannot buy anymore. He said nothing. He began, methodically and without ceremony, to hang them along his front wall. The street went quiet. Not the awkward quiet of people who do not know what to do, the specific quiet of people witnessing something they understand to be significant without being able to name exactly why. Janet from number 9 appeared at Maya's elbow. "Has he ever?" she began. "No," Maya said. "Never." Harold finished hanging his lights. He stepped back and looked at them for a moment, the faded large bulb lights, the ones from 30 years ago, the ones Eleanor had chosen. Then he looked at Maya. And for the first time in 30 years, on a cold December pavement on Alderton Close, Harold Sinclair smiled. It was not a large smile. It was the careful smile of someone who has been a long time out of practice, who is trying something that requires the specific courage of the unpracticed. But it was real. It was entirely real. "She bought them the first Christmas we moved in," he said. His voice was different, not quieter but lighter, as if something had been removed from it. She said they were the friendliest lights she had ever seen. The mulled wine came out. The whole street stood in the cold and looked at the lights of Alderton Close, all of them burning together for the first time in a very long time. Harold Sinclair drank his wine slowly and received, without backing away from it, the greetings of people who had lived 40 feet from him for 30 years and were only now on a cold December pavement shaking his hand. Harold did not become a different man after that December. He did not suddenly appear at street parties or join the WhatsApp group or wave from his front step with the enthusiasm of a man making up for lost time. He was still Harold, still private, still economical with words, still out at 10:15 on Tuesdays and Fridays with his canvas bag. But the door was fractionally more open in the way that matters most, the way that is invisible to anyone not paying attention. The notes continued. Sometimes Harold left one in return. Short, precise, written in the careful handwriting of someone who has written a great many addresses in his professional life. Once in February, he left a single red rose from his garden on Maya's step, dried and tied with a piece of string. No note. No explanation. The rose was explanation enough. Here is what Alderton Close learned that December, without anyone giving a speech about it. That silence is almost never what it looks like from the outside. The man who never smiles is not always the man who has nothing to smile about. Sometimes he is the man who has so much, who had so much, that the absence of it made smiling seem like a language he no longer had the right to speak. And sometimes all it takes is a plate of food left on a step. A note about roses. Someone who knocks on the door and, when the man inside says "I'm fine," is patient enough to stand on the step and say, "I don't think that's quite true." The loneliest people on your street are often the quietest ones. Not because they have nothing to say, Because nobody has asked them the right question slowly enough and been willing to wait for the answer. Knock on the door. Bring something warm. Wait.